Welcome, I'm John, and today I'm going to tell you an exciting story. Millionaire comes home early and witnesses a scene that will change his life forever. Logan Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the fog roll over the Golden Gate Bridge like a shroud. At 42 years old, he had everything the world told him to want: a tech empire worth billions, a mansion in Pacific Heights that graced the covers of architecture magazines, and a reputation that made venture capitalists and competitors alike lean forward when he spoke. Yet as he stared at his reflection in the glass, he saw only the outline of a man who had forgotten how to feel. His days were measured in increments: 7 a.m., conference calls with Tokyo; 9 a.m., board meetings; 12:30 lunch with investors at Boulevard; 3 p.m., strategy sessions; 7 p.m., networking dinners at Gary Danko. Every moment accounted for, every interaction transactional. Even his penthouse suite at the office, with its Eames chairs and abstract art, felt more like home than the sprawling mansion where he slept. The mansion, 20 rooms, most of which he'd never entered; a chef's kitchen he never cooked in; a library filled with first editions he'd never read; a Steinway grand piano in the main salon, his grandfather's, inherited but untouched, gathering dust like a museum piece. The only signs of life in that cavernous space were the people he paid to maintain it: the gardener who came on Tuesdays, the chef who prepared meals he ate alone, and Sarah Miller, the housekeeper who arrived at 6 every morning and disappeared before he returned each evening. Sarah. Logan couldn't recall ever having a real conversation with her. He'd hired her 2 years ago through an agency, references impeccable, work ethic unquestionable. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair usually pulled into a practical ponytail, quiet, almost invisible, exactly what he preferred. He paid well, she did her job flawlessly, and their paths rarely crossed. That was the arrangement. That was how Logan liked things: clean, simple, uncomplicated by human messiness. On this particular Wednesday in late October, Logan's carefully constructed schedule cracked. A merger negotiation that should have consumed his afternoon collapsed when the other company's CEO suffered a heart attack. The meeting was canceled. His evening dinner was pushed to next week. Suddenly, at 3:15 p.m., Logan found himself with nowhere to be. His assistant, Monica, had looked at him with barely concealed shock when he announced he was going home. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Whitmore?" "I'm fine. Just tired." He wasn't tired. He was something else, something he couldn't name. A restlessness had been building in him for weeks, maybe months. A sense that the machinery of his life was running smoothly while he himself was slowly disappearing. The drive from Soma to Pacific Heights took 20 minutes in midday traffic. His driver, James, asked no questions, just pulled up to the mansion's iron gates and waited for them to swing open. Logan entered through the front door, already loosening his tie. The house was silent, as always. Sarah would have finished by now, he thought. She typically left by 2:30. Then he heard it. Piano. The sound stopped him mid-step, his hand frozen on his tie. It wasn't the generic classical music that sometimes played through the house's sound system. This was different. Immediate, present, alive. Someone was playing his grandfather's piano. Logan moved toward the sound, his Italian leather shoes silent on the marble floor. The salon doors were open, and there, bathed in the golden afternoon light streaming through the bay windows, sat Sarah. Her eyes were closed, her fingers moving across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible. The melody was haunting, melancholic yet hopeful, simple in structure but rich with emotion. She played as if the piano were an extension of her own body, as if the music had been trapped inside her and was finally, desperately, breaking free. Logan stood in the doorway, transfixed. He'd been to symphony halls, opera houses, exclusive performances by world-renowned musicians, but he'd never witnessed anything like this raw, unguarded beauty. This wasn't performance. This was confession. When the last note faded into silence, Sarah opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. Then she saw him. The color drained from Sarah's face. She jerked her hands away from the keys as if they'd burned her, the sudden movement causing a discordant clash of notes that echoed through the salon like an accusation. "Mr. Whitmore, I—" Her voice came out strangled, panicked. She stood so abruptly the piano bench scraped against the hardwood floor. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have—" I didn't think you'd be home. I never— Wait. The word came out rougher than Logan intended. He cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. Please, don't go. But Sarah was already backing away, her hands trembling as she smoothed down her plain gray work uniform. Her eyes, dark brown, he noticed for the first time, were wide with something between shame and fear, the fear of someone who'd just crossed an invisible line and knew there would be consequences. I finished all my work early, she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. The kitchen is clean. The bedrooms are done. I restocked everything. I was about to leave. I swear. I just saw the piano and She trailed off, looking down. It won't happen again. Logan realized she thought he was angry, that she was about to be fired. The realization made something twist uncomfortably in his chest. When had he become the kind of man whose employees feared him even in his own home? He held up his hand in what he hoped was a reassuring gesture. You're not in trouble, Sarah. He took a careful step into the room, the way one might approach a startled deer. That was what you were playing. It was beautiful. She glanced up at him, disbelief flickering across her features. You're not upset? Upset. Logan moved to one of the leather armchairs near the piano, deliberately sitting down to make himself less imposing. I don't know what I am. Surprised. That piano hasn't been played in years. I didn't even know it still worked properly. It needed tuning, Sarah said quietly, some of the panic easing from her posture. I called a tuner last month. I paid for it myself. I didn't put it on your account or anything. I know I probably shouldn't have, but I just couldn't stand seeing it sit there unplayed when it's such a beautiful instrument. Logan stared at her. His housekeeper had paid, out of her own pocket, to tune a piano that wasn't hers, in a house where she was merely an employee. The gesture was so unexpected, so outside the transactional nature of their arrangement, that he didn't know how to respond. You paid to tune my piano, he said slowly. Sarah's cheeks flushed. I know it sounds crazy. My friend Rosa, she works 2 houses down. She says I'm too sentimental about things that aren't mine. But I grew up around instruments that nobody took care of, and it always broke my heart. A Steinway like this, it deserves to be played. Where did you learn? Logan leaned forward, genuinely curious. Who taught you to play like that? No one. She said it simply, without pride or self-pity. There was an old upright piano at the public library in Oakland where I grew up. During middle school, I'd go there after classes and teach myself. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, she'd let me stay until closing. She gave me some old theory books that were going to be thrown away. You taught yourself to play like that from library books and YouTube videos later, when I could afford a phone. A small smile crossed her face, the first he'd ever seen. It transformed her, made her seem less like a shadow moving through his house and more like an actual person with depth, with history. I was obsessed. My mom thought I was wasting time, that I should focus on getting skills for a real job. She wasn't wrong, I guess. Piano doesn't exactly pay the bills. Logan thought about his own childhood, the private tutors, the elite prep schools. Every door opened before he could even reach for the handle. The best music teachers money could buy. Lessons he'd quit after 2 years because he found them boring. Play something else, he said suddenly. Please. If you want to. Sarah hesitated, her fingers twitching at her sides as if they had their own desires separate from her hesitation. You really mean that? I do. She returned to the bench slowly, settling herself with a deep breath. This time, when her fingers touched the keys, she glanced at him once, a question and an offering, before she began to play. The melody Sarah played was different this time, lighter, more playful, with cascading runs that reminded Logan of water flowing over stones. He watched her face as she played, noticing details he'd never seen before. The way her eyebrows drew together slightly during complex passages, the almost imperceptible sway of her shoulders as she moved with the music, the complete absorption that erased the nervous employee and revealed someone else entirely, someone confident, alive, fully present. When she finished, the silence that followed felt different than before, less awkward, more contemplative. Chopin, Logan said, surprising himself. Waltz in a minor. Sarah's eyes widened. You know classical music? My grandfather loved Chopin. He tried to teach me when I was young, before he died. Logan looked at the piano, remembering weathered hands guiding his small fingers across the keys. I wasn't very good, didn't have the patience for it. Or maybe you just hadn't found the right reason to play. Sarah said softly. Then she seemed to catch herself, remembering the boundary between them. I should go. I've already stayed too long. What time do you usually leave? 2:30. It's almost 4 now. Logan stood, pulling his wallet from his jacket. Let me pay you for the extra time. No. The word came out firm, almost sharp. Sarah shook her head. I wasn't working. I was playing your piano without permission. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Whitmore. Logan, he said. You can call me Logan. She looked at him like he'd suggested something absurd. That wouldn't be appropriate. Why not? Because you're my employer. She said it as if explaining something obvious to a child. There are lines. Logan wanted to argue that the lines were arbitrary, that they were alone in his house discussing music like two normal people. But he could see in her expression that those lines mattered to her. Perhaps they were all that kept her sense of dignity intact in a job that required her to clean up after a man who'd never bothered to learn her last name until he'd read it on her employment file. Will you come back tomorrow? He asked instead. To play, I mean, after your work is done. Sarah gathered her bag from where she'd left it by the door, her movements careful, measured. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because... She paused, searching for words. Because pianos like this are meant for people who've earned them. People who went to conservatories and studied under masters, not housekeepers who learned from library books. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Logan's voice came out harder than he intended. My grandfather would have hated that attitude. He believed music belonged to anyone who loved it enough to pursue it. Your grandfather sounds like he was a good man. He was. And he would have wanted this piano played by someone who actually cares about it, not just owned by someone who can afford it. Sarah met his eyes then, really looked at him, and Logan felt exposed in a way he hadn't felt in years, as if she could see past the expensive suit and the carefully maintained image to something hollow underneath. I'll think about it, she said finally, but I need to go now. My bus comes in 15 minutes. You take the bus? Logan hadn't even considered how his employees got to and from his house. From where? The Tenderloin. It's about an hour commute each way. The Tenderloin, one of San Francisco's roughest neighborhoods, a world away from Pacific Heights, tree-lined streets and Victorian mansions. Logan tried to imagine Sarah's day, up before dawn, long bus rides, hours of physical labor in his house, then the journey back to a reality he'd never had to think about. Let James drive you, he offered. My driver. He can take you home. That's not necessary. Sarah. I'm fine, Mr. Whitmore. Really. She was already at the front door, her hand on the ornate handle. Thank you for not being angry. About the piano. Tomorrow, Logan said, surprising himself with his own insistence. Play tomorrow, please. Consider it part of your job, if that makes it easier. She smiled, sad, knowing. You can't pay people to be your friends, Mr. Whitmore. That's not how it works. Then she was gone, the heavy door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like the end of something. Logan stood alone in his mansion, surrounded by silence once again, and realized that for the first time in years, he didn't want to be. Logan didn't sleep well that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of his master suite, replaying the afternoon in his mind. The music, Sarah's hands on the keys, the way she'd looked at him when she said he couldn't pay people to be his friends, as if she'd seen straight through to the loneliness he'd spent years pretending didn't exist. At 2 a.m., he got up and went downstairs to the salon. The piano sat in the moonlight streaming through the bay windows, silent and patient. He sat on the bench where Sarah had sat, placed his fingers on the keys the way his grandfather had taught him 30 years ago, and pressed down. The notes came out clumsy, hesitant. He tried to remember the basic scales, but his fingers stumbled over themselves. After 5 minutes of discordant noise, he gave up, frustration burning in his chest. Sarah had taught herself to play beautifully. He'd had every advantage and had abandoned it because it wasn't immediately easy. The realization stung more than he wanted to admit. The next morning, Logan did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He worked from home. He sent Monica a brief email saying he'd be handling calls remotely, ignoring her 3 follow-up messages asking if everything was all right. He set up his laptop in the study adjacent to the salon. The door opened so he could hear when Sarah arrived. At 6:05 a.m., he heard the soft click of the front door, her quiet footsteps moving toward the kitchen. Logan forced himself to focus on emails, on quarterly reports, on anything but the urge to go talk to her. She was working. He needed to respect that. But awareness of her presence in the house, something he'd never noticed before, now seemed to fill every room. At noon, he emerged from the study to find lunch prepared on the kitchen island. A Mediterranean salad with grilled chicken, fresh bread, a perfectly arranged plate that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Sarah was wiping down the counters, her back to him. She stiffened when she heard him enter. "And you didn't have to make me lunch," Logan said. "That's not in your job description." "You're home," she replied without turning around. It seemed wrong not to. "Sarah." He waited until she turned to face him. She looked tired, he noticed. Dark circles under her eyes, a tension in her shoulders. "Did you think about what I asked? About playing the piano?" She set down the cloth, folding it with precise, careful movements. "I did. And I don't think it's a good idea to blur the lines between employer and employee, Mr. Whitmore. Yesterday it was a mistake, a boundary I shouldn't have crossed. What if I changed your job description?" The idea had come to him somewhere around 4 a.m. "What if I hired you to play the piano, say, an hour a day, in addition to your other duties? I'd pay you extra." Sarah's expression shifted, something between amusement and sadness. "You're trying to pay me to be your friend again." "No, I'm trying to pay you to do something you love, that I happen to benefit from hearing. That's not friendship, that's employment, that's charity. It's not charity if you're providing something of value." Logan moved closer, careful not to invade her space. "You said that piano deserves to be played. You were right, and clearly, I'm not going to play it. So either you do, or it sits there gathering dust for another decade. Your choice." Sarah studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or ulterior motives. "Why does this matter so much to you?" The question caught him off guard. Logan thought about the easy answer, that he appreciated music, that he wanted the piano used. But standing there in his kitchen, with this woman who'd somehow punctured his carefully maintained isolation, he found himself telling the truth. "Because yesterday, for 20 minutes, I felt something other than numb. And I haven't felt anything real in so long that I'd almost forgotten what it was like." He paused. "The music you played, it reminded me that there are things in the world worth paying attention to. Things that matter beyond spreadsheets and market shares." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "That's a lot of pressure to put on a housekeeper's piano playing." "Maybe, but it's honest." She picked up the cloth again, twisting it in her hands, a nervous gesture that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. 1 hour, after I finish my regular work, and you pay me my normal hourly rate, nothing extra. That's not, those are my terms, Mr. Whitmore. Take them or leave them." Logan smiled, the first genuine smile he could remember in months. "Deal." The arrangement began the following Monday. Sarah finished her cleaning by 2:30, and at 3 o'clock sharp, she sat at the piano while Logan positioned himself in the leather armchair with a book he pretended to read. The first few sessions were formal, almost stiff. Sarah played classical pieces, Bach, Mozart, Debussy, beautiful but safe, as if she were performing for a stranger rather than sharing something personal. Logan listened, grateful for the music but sensing she was holding back, showing him only the surface. On Thursday, he broke the unspoken rule of silence. "Where did you learn that piece?" he asked as she finished a Beethoven sonata. Sarah's hands stilled on the keys. "YouTube. There's a pianist in Prague who does incredible tutorials." "You learned Beethoven from YouTube?" "You learn everything from somewhere." She shifted on the bench to face him. "Most people just have fancier sources." "I wasn't criticizing. I'm amazed." Logan set down his book, a biography of Steve Jobs he'd been staring at without reading for 3 days. "Do you ever play your own music?" "Things you've composed." Something flickered across her face. Vulnerability, quickly hidden. "Sometimes, but it's not very good." "Can I hear it?" "I don't think." "Sarah." He leaned forward. "You've been playing other people's music for me all week. I'd like to hear yours." She turned back to the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys uncertainly. "It's not polished. I've never had formal training in composition. I'm not a music critic. I'm just someone who wants to listen." After a long pause, she began to play. The piece was unlike anything she'd played before. Raw, emotional, with unexpected chord progressions that somehow felt exactly right. It spoke of longing and resilience, of beauty found in difficult places. Logan found himself leaning forward, captivated not just by the music but by the story it told about the woman playing it. When she finished, her shoulders were tense, waiting for judgment. "And that was remarkable," Logan said quietly. "What's it called?" "It doesn't have a name. It's just something I worked on in my head during bus rides." "You composed that entire piece in your head?" "I don't have a piano at home," she said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "So I compose in my mind and try to remember it until I can play it somewhere." The casual mention of such dedication stunned him. "How many pieces have you written?" "I don't know. 20, 30. Most of them I've forgotten because I couldn't write them down fast enough." Logan stood abruptly, startling her. He left the room and returned moments later with a leather-bound journal and an expensive pen. "Here, write them down. The music notation, I mean." Sarah stared at the journal as if it were something dangerous. "Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept." "You're not accepting a gift. You're accepting a tool for your work." He placed it on the piano. "If you're going to play for me, I want to hear your original compositions, but you can't share them if you can't remember them, so write them down." She touched the journal carefully, her fingers tracing the embossed leather. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Caring. You didn't even notice I existed for 2 years, and now you're buying me journals and asking about my music like it matters." The words should have felt accusatory, but they didn't. They felt like an honest question from someone trying to understand a sudden shift in her reality. Logan sat back down, considering his answer. "I think I've been sleepwalking through my life for a long time, going through motions, checking boxes, building things that don't actually mean anything. And then I heard you play, and it was like..." He paused, searching for the right words. "It was like someone turned the lights on in a room I didn't know was dark." Sarah's eyes glistened. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my music." Then people haven't been paying attention. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, something shifting between them. Not quite friendship, not quite professional distance, but something new and undefined. "There's a music store in North Beach," Logan said. "They sell composition software, music theory books. This weekend, would you let me take you there? Consider it a business expense, improving the quality of my in-house entertainment." Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You're very persistent when you want something. I've been told it's one of my few admirable qualities." "I'll think about it," she said, but her hand was already opening the journal, her eyes scanning the blank pages as if seeing possibilities written there. Saturday arrived with rare autumn sunshine flooding through San Francisco's fog. Logan found himself nervous as he waited in the foyer, checking his watch every few minutes. He'd offered to pick Sarah up, but she'd insisted on meeting him at the music store. Another boundary she refused to let him cross. North Beach bustled with weekend crowds, tourists heading to Cobb's Comedy Club, locals grabbing espresso at Café Trieste, street musicians playing on corners. Logan arrived at Sunset Music 15 minutes early and stood outside feeling absurdly out of place in his casual clothes. He couldn't remember the last time he'd gone shopping for anything other than necessity. Sarah appeared at precisely 11 a.m., emerging from the Powell Street BART station. She wore jeans and a simple green sweater that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd met her, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She looked different outside his house, younger, less burdened, almost shy as she approached. "You came," Logan said, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. "I said I would." She glanced at the store's window display. Keyboards, guitars, sheet music, though I'm still not sure this is appropriate. "It's a music store, Sarah, not a romantic getaway." Her cheeks colored slightly. "I know that. I just meant people talk. Your neighbors, other employees." "Rosa already asked me why you've been home so much lately." "And what did you tell her?" "That you're working remotely." She met his eyes. What should I have told her? Logan held the door open. "The truth, that I'm learning to appreciate something I've ignored for too long." Inside, Sunset Music was a maze of instruments and equipment. A young man with multiple piercings greeted them enthusiastically, launching into a sales pitch about their latest digital pianos. Logan was about to interrupt when Sarah stepped forward. "We're looking for composition software and music theory resources," she said with quiet confidence. "Intermediate to advanced level." The clerk's demeanor shifted, recognizing a serious musician. "Absolutely. We've got Finale, Sibelius, some great theory workbooks. Are you composing for performance or personal work?" "Personal, mostly, but I'm hoping to develop it further." As Sarah discussed software features and notation systems with the clerk, Logan watched her transform. The hesitant housekeeper disappeared, replaced by someone knowledgeable and passionate, speaking a language he barely understood. She debated the merits of different programs, asked technical questions, handled demonstration keyboards with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime around instruments. "You really know your stuff," the clerk said admiringly. "Where did you study?" "I didn't." "Self-taught?" "No way. Seriously." He looked impressed. "That's incredible. You should check out the community board. We post notices about local musicians looking for collaborators, open mic nights, that kind of thing." Sarah glanced at the corkboard covered in flyers. Logan saw something cross her face, longing mixed with resignation. "Maybe," she said non-committally. They left an hour later with composition software, 3 theory books, blank sheet music, and a portable MIDI keyboard that Sarah had protested was too expensive until Logan simply handed his credit card to the clerk. "You can't just," she started as they walked down Columbus Avenue. "I can, and I did. Consider it an investment in your work. My work is cleaning your house. Your work is creating music. Cleaning my house is just how you pay your bills." Logan stopped walking, forcing her to face him. "There's a difference, Sarah, a big one." She hugged the bag containing the keyboard to her chest like a shield. "Why does this matter so much to you? Really? Not the corporate answer you gave me before. The real reason." Logan looked past her at the Saturday crowds, at people living their lives with purpose and connection. "So because I built an empire and forgot to build a life, and watching you create something beautiful out of nothing reminds me of what actually matters. Is that real enough?" Sarah's expression softened. "You're not as empty as you think you are, Logan." It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it, spoken in her voice, did something to him, cracked open a space inside his chest he'd kept sealed for years. "I'm hungry," he said abruptly, deflecting from emotions he didn't know how to process. "There's a place near here, Tony's, best pizza in the city. Have you eaten?" Logan. "Just lunch, Sarah. 2 people who both happen to need food, eating at the same time. It doesn't have to be complicated." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the desire to say yes fighting against every instinct telling her to maintain distance. "One slice," she finally said, "and then I should get home." "1 slice," Logan agreed, knowing he'd won something important, even if he wasn't sure what. Tony's Pizza occupied a narrow storefront that had been serving North Beach since 1935. The walls were covered with faded photographs of Frank Sinatra, Joe DiMaggio, and countless other celebrities who'd eaten there over the decades. The smell of baking dough and oregano filled the air as they slid into a worn red vinyl booth. Sarah looked around with wide eyes. "I've walked past this place 100 times, but never came in. It always seemed like somewhere for tourists." "It's where my grandfather used to bring me," Logan said, surprised by his own words. He rarely spoke about his grandfather to anyone. Every Saturday when I was a kid, he'd order the same thing, pepperoni and mushroom, and tell me stories about immigrating from Italy. "Your family is Italian. My grandfather came through Ellis Island in 1958 with nothing but a violin and $20. Built a construction business from the ground up." Logan traced a finger along a crack in the table. "He's the one who taught me that money isn't the measure of a man's worth." "I'm not sure when I forgot that." The waiter came, and Sarah ordered a margarita slice while Logan got his grandfather's favorite. When the food arrived, Sarah took a bite and closed her eyes, making a small sound of appreciation that made Logan smile. "Okay, you were right," she admitted. "This is incredible." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Sarah spoke again. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Yes." "Why are you alone?" "You're successful. She hesitated. "You're not difficult to look at. You could have anyone. So why that big empty house with no one in it?" Logan set down his slice, the question hitting closer than she probably intended. "I was married once, long time ago, right after I sold my first startup. Her name was Vanessa. Beautiful, sophisticated, everything I thought I wanted. What happened? She wanted the lifestyle more than she wanted me. When the company hit a rough patch and money got tight for a while, she left, found someone wealthier, more established." He took a drink of water. "After that, I decided it was easier to just not let anyone get close, build the empire, prove I was worth something, stay in control." "That sounds lonely." "It is." He met her eyes. "But it's predictable. And for a long time, I convinced myself that was enough. Sarah wiped her hands on a napkin carefully. My mom used to clean houses too. She raised me and my brother alone after my dad left when I was 5. She worked 3 jobs, never complained, never asked for help. When I was 16, she got sick, breast cancer. By the time they caught it, it was stage 4. Sarah, she died 6 months later. Left me with medical bills I'm still paying off and a brother who needs help with his education. She looked down at her plate. So when people ask me why I clean houses for rich people instead of pursuing music, that's why. Because dreams don't pay hospital bills. Dreams don't send your little brother to community college. The weight of her words settled between them. Logan thought about his own privileged grief, a failed marriage to someone who'd never really loved him, compared to her loss of someone who'd sacrificed everything. How old is your brother? 19. David. He's studying computer science at City College. Works nights at a grocery store to help with expenses. Pride colored her voice. He's brilliant, has a 4.0 GPA, wants to work in cybersecurity. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. He's the reason I keep going when things get hard. She met Logan's eyes. But sometimes I wonder what my mom would think of the choices I've made. She loved my music. She's the one who used to take me to the library, who encouraged me to play even when it seemed impractical. I think she'd be proud of you, Logan said quietly, for taking care of your brother, for not giving up on your music entirely, for being strong enough to keep both alive, even when it's difficult. Sarah's eyes glistened. That's a kind thing to say. It's a true thing to say. The waiter returned with the check, and Logan reached for it immediately. But Sarah grabbed his wrist, her fingers warm against his skin. Let me pay for mine, she said. Please, I need this to be equal, at least in some small way. Logan wanted to argue, to insist, to use his money to solve this tiny problem like he solved everything else. But he saw in her expression how much it mattered, this small act of independence, of dignity. Okay, he said, releasing the check. Equal. She smiled, and it felt like a gift. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the mansion on Pacific Heights. The silence that had defined Logan's life for years gave way to music, Sarah's compositions filling rooms that had never known such warmth. She arrived each morning at 6, completed her work by 2:30, and spent the next hour at the piano while Logan listened, sometimes working, sometimes simply absorbing. But increasingly, they talked about music, about life, about the unexpected ways people find meaning. Sarah opened up about her childhood in Oakland, the struggles and small joys. Logan shared stories about his grandfather, about building his company, about the emptiness of success without purpose. The boundaries between them blurred, despite Sarah's attempts to maintain them. Logan found himself working from home more often. He asked her opinion on things that had nothing to do with housekeeping, a painting he was considering buying, a charity he'd been approached about. She started leaving him notes with the compositions she'd written, little messages in the margins. This one reminded me of your grandfather. Or, tried something new with the bridge. Let me know what you think. His colleagues noticed the change. At a board meeting, his CFO commented that Logan seemed disturbingly cheerful lately. Monica, his assistant, asked point blank if he was seeing someone. No, he'd answered, but the word felt like a lie even as he said it. It was a Thursday in late November when everything crystallized. Sarah had finished a new composition, something she'd been working on for weeks. The piece was different from her others, more hopeful, built on ascending progressions that suggested transformation, possibility. As she played the final notes, Logan found himself standing, moving toward the piano without conscious thought. Sarah looked up at him, and the expression on her face, vulnerable, open, asking a question neither of them had dared voice, made his heart hammer in his chest. Sarah, he began, but didn't know how to finish. She stood, and suddenly they were inches apart, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of jasmine in her hair. We can't, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Why not? Because I work for you. Because you're you and you're what? Someone extraordinary who I can't stop thinking about. Someone who made me remember what it feels like to be alive. Logan, please. Her voice broke. You don't understand what you're asking. If this goes wrong, I don't just lose whatever this is. I lose my job. I lose the income that pays for David's school and my mom's medical debt. I lose everything. The reality of her words hit him like cold water. He'd been thinking about this, whatever this was between them, as simply two people connecting. He hadn't fully considered the power imbalance, the risk she would be taking, the consequences that would fall so much heavier on her than on him. "You're right," he said, stepping back. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about—" "But I want to." The words came out rushed, desperate. "God help me, Logan. I want to so badly it scares me. These past weeks have been the happiest I've been since my mom died. Coming here isn't just about work anymore. It's about you. About the way you listen to my music like it matters. About the way you see me when the rest of the world looks right through me." Logan's hands trembled with the effort of not reaching for her. "Tell me what you need. What would make this possible without putting you at risk?" Sarah laughed, but it sounded like crying. "I need you to not be my employer. I need us to be equals. I need the world to be different than it is. Then I'll change it. You can't just watch me." Logan pulled out his phone, his mind already racing through possibilities. "I'll hire a cleaning service. You'll no longer work for me. We'll be—" "And then what? I lose this income entirely." Sarah shook her head. "Logan, you're trying to solve this with money again. That's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works." The frustration in his voice echoed through the salon. They stood there, two people caught between what they wanted and what seemed possible. The piano silent between them like a witness to something breaking. Sarah picked up her bag, her movements mechanical. "I need to think about all of this, about what I'm willing to risk and what I can't afford to lose." "Sarah, wait." But she was already walking toward the door, and Logan knew that if he stopped her now, if he pushed any harder, he might shatter whatever fragile thing had grown between them. The door closed softly, and Logan sank onto the piano bench, his head in his hands, wondering how wanting something good could feel so impossible. Sarah didn't come to work the next day, or the day after that. She called Monica, citing a family emergency, her voice distant and professional. Logan spent those 48 hours in a state he barely recognized, anxious, restless, unable to focus on anything except the silence in his house that had become unbearable again. He threw himself into work, taking meetings he'd normally delegate, staying at the office until midnight. But even there, he couldn't escape. His assistant found him staring at his computer screen on Saturday morning, the same email unread for 20 minutes. "Go home, Mr. Whitmore," Monica said gently, "or go wherever you need to go. But you're no good to anyone like this." That night, Logan sat at his grandfather's piano, placing his clumsy fingers on the keys. He tried to play the scales he'd abandoned decades ago, stumbling through them with frustration. But he kept trying, kept pushing through the difficulty, because now he understood what his grandfather had been trying to teach him, that some things worth having required patience, required vulnerability, required being willing to fail. On Sunday evening, his doorbell rang. Logan practically ran to answer it, hope surging in his chest. But it wasn't Sarah. It was a young man, late teens, with Sarah's dark eyes and a nervous expression. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm David, Sarah's brother." Logan's stomach dropped. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's fine. Physically, anyway." David shifted his backpack. "She doesn't know I'm here. She'd probably kill me if she found out. But I needed to talk to you." Logan led him to the kitchen, offered coffee that David declined. They sat at the island where Sarah had made him lunch that first day, and Logan waited, fear and hope warring in his chest. "Sarah told me what happened," David began. "Not all the details, but enough. She's been crying for 2 days, which I've never seen her do, not even when our mom died." The words hit Logan like a physical blow. "I never meant to hurt her. I know. She knows that too. But she's terrified." David leaned forward, his young face serious beyond his years. "Mr. Whitmore, my sister has spent her entire life taking care of other people. She sacrificed her dreams to raise me after Mom died. She works jobs she's overqualified for because they're stable and they pay the bills. She's never, not once, done anything just for herself. I want her to be able to do that, to pursue her music, to— I know what you want, and I think she wants it too. But you have to understand, if she takes this risk and it falls apart, she loses everything. Her job, her security, maybe even her self-respect. She's not like you. She doesn't have a safety net." Logan absorbed this, feeling the full weight of the chasm between their worlds. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you need to prove to her that this isn't just some rich guy's fantasy, that you're serious about her, about changing your life, about meeting her halfway instead of expecting her to climb up to where you are. David pulled a folded paper from his pocket. She wrote this, a composition. She was working on it all weekend. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. He handed Logan the sheet music. At the top, in Sarah's careful handwriting, was a title, The Sound That Broke the Silence. That's what she calls you, in her head, David said quietly. The sound that broke her silence. The thing that woke her up. She's in love with you, Mr. Whitmore. But love isn't enough when you're scared of losing everything. After David left, Logan sat alone with the composition, studying the notes even though he couldn't hear them in his mind the way Sarah could. But he could see the emotion in the structure, the hope and fear woven into every measure. He thought about his grandfather, about the lessons he'd been too young and arrogant to appreciate, about how the old man had come to America with nothing and built a life through courage and persistence, about how he'd valued music not because it was profitable, but because it fed the soul. Logan pulled out his phone and began making calls. It was Sunday night, but he had enough money and influence to get people to answer. By midnight, he had a plan. Reckless, possibly stupid, but the first truly honest thing he'd done in years. On Monday morning, he went to the office and typed a letter that would change everything. His hand trembled as he signed it, but he didn't hesitate. Some things, he'd finally learned, were worth the risk. Sarah stood outside the mansion on Tuesday morning, her hand hovering over the doorbell. She'd spent 3 days away, 3 days wrestling with fear and desire, 3 days imagining every possible future, the ones where she was brave and the ones where she was smart. She still wasn't sure which choice she was making. The door opened before she could ring. Logan stood there, and the sight of him, rumpled hair, tired eyes, obvious relief flooding his face, nearly undid her resolve to keep things professional. Sarah, thank God. I thought. He stopped himself. Come in, please. I need to show you something. She followed him through the foyer, expecting him to lead her to the salon. Instead, he brought her to his study, where papers covered the desk in chaotic piles, so unlike his usual meticulous organization. I made some changes, Logan said, picking up a document. First, I've resigned as CEO of Whitmore Technologies, effective immediately. Sarah's eyes widened. You what? I'm staying on the board, but I'm stepping back from daily operations. I've been using work as an excuse to avoid living for too long. That ends now. He handed her another paper. Second, I've established the Miller Foundation for Musical Arts. It's endowed with $20 million to provide instruments, lessons, and scholarships to underprivileged students in the Bay Area. Logan, you can't. I can, and I did. Your brother David will be one of the first scholarship recipients, full ride to any 4-year university he chooses, plus living expenses. Logan's hands shook slightly as he picked up a third document. And this is a contract offering you a position as the Foundation's first artist in residence and program director. $60,000 a year, full benefits, complete creative control over your own music. You wouldn't work for me, you'd work for the Foundation, which has an independent board. Sarah couldn't speak. She stared at the papers, at this man who was trying to dismantle every barrier between them with the only tools he knew, money and grand gestures. This is insane, she finally whispered. Probably, but I've been sane my whole life, and it got me nowhere. Logan moved closer. Sarah, I can't change the world. I can't make us equal in every way. But I can change my world. I can step down, build something meaningful, meet you somewhere in the middle instead of expecting you to give up everything to reach me. Why? Her voice broke. Why would you do all this? Because I love you. The words came out simple, certain. Because you reminded me what it means to be human. Because watching you create beauty from nothing made me want to do the same. Because I'm tired of being half alive in a life that looks perfect on paper. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I'm terrified. What if this doesn't work? What if? Then we'll have tried. We'll have been brave enough to reach for something real. Logan cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I can't promise perfect, Sarah, but I can promise honest. I can promise that I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of what you've given me. Sarah thought about her mother, about the advice she'd given before she died. Don't be so afraid of falling that you forget to jump. She thought about David, who'd risked Sarah's anger to push her toward happiness. She thought about all the years she'd played it safe, chosen security over dreams, silence over song. I love you too, she said, and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper. A conversation without words, a promise and a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing, overwhelmed by the impossibility and rightness of the moment. "Play for me," Logan asked, leading her to the salon. "That new piece David mentioned." The sound that broke the silence. Sarah sat at the piano, no longer as an employee or an artist in residence, but as a woman who'd finally found the courage to let herself be seen. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The music filled the mansion, transforming it from a mausoleum of wealth into a home alive with possibility. Logan listened, tears streaming freely down his face, as Sarah's composition told their story. The loneliness, the unexpected connection, the fear, the leap of faith. When the final notes faded, he sat beside her on the bench, and together they looked out at the San Francisco skyline, at a world that suddenly seemed full of music they'd only just begun to hear. Outside, the fog was lifting. The end. Did you like this story? Would you have done anything differently? Tell me in the comments. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to receive more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Thank you very much.